Good evening, everyone. Good evening, ma'am. Shall we start?
Yes, we can
Yes.
start the session. Are you able to see my screen? Because I've already shared, I guess.
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, great.
So, good evening, everyone. I'll introduce today's speaker with us, Dr. Monica Jha. She completed BNYS from S. Vyasa University and MSc in Yoga. Now she is working as a senior research fellow in Center for Integrative Medicine and Research, AIMS, New Delhi. Welcome you, ma'am, in this small virtual platform for this wonderful talk. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So, am I audible to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. So I can go ahead, right? Or shall we wait for a few more minutes for
No, no,
others
we
to
can.
join?
No, no, we can start.
Okay, great. So now the thing is that I am not very sure. All of you, are you fourth year students, the entire group, or some of you are third year, second years as well?
Third year and second year as well.
There are second years also. Okay. So because I have prepared a very general basic understanding of research methodology, which will definitely be useful to everybody over here. But along with that, I have also prepared a section where I'll be talking about how to prepare a research project for yourself. Because I feel that that is one aspect where we lack, even though we have a subject called research methodology, but we are somehow not equipped enough to make our own projects or think what topic do we want for our own dissertation. Uh, so I want you to think in that direction during the presentation. Even after that, we'll be discussing. And so in between, if you guys get any of the questions, what you can do is note it down, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Okay. Okay. So let's begin. As I as I said that we'll be discussing about two things. The first one is basic terminologies in research methods. And the second aspect of today's presentation is how to write or pick a topic for your research. Okay. So let's go ahead with the presentation for today. Just a second. Okay. So I'll be telling you that towards the end of this presentation, I want all of you to do two activities. The first one would be decide a topic at the end of this research presentation for yourself. And the second is, if you can, whoever is a final year student and is about to go for their this internship, for them, this second part would be more applicable. What you have to do is you have to decide on a specific question for your thesis. Okay. So these two activities will be working on towards the end of this presentation. Okay. Now, as you can see, there are different types of researches, and what we are most interested in is clinical research. So when we talk about clinical research, there are again different categories into it. The first one, as you can see, is a clinical trial. The second one, translational research. So clinical trial is a research design wherein the drug trials, for example, the one which is going on for COVID-19, it's a clinical trial where a particular drug is being tested over animals or subjects, and based on the research outcomes, it would be decided whether it is effective or not. Okay. Just I want any of you to respond whether I'm being clear or not. Do you want me to go slow?
It's clear, ma'am.
Okay, great. So as you can see, there are other types of clinical researches also. They are translational research. So what is a translational research is studies which are done on a greater scale, and where it might be translating, or which might be very applicable to different aspects of our lives. So for example, if you're doing something in elderly patients, so it should be able to get generalized for a huge number of that population, like anything which is to do with their like knee surgeries, or anything which is a huge problem in that field. So you are addressing to that problem and finding out solutions. So that is somehow called as translational research, which translates into something useful in daily life. Then diagnostic research is again, so diagnostic research is again something to do with finding a diagnostic tool, or something to do with the prognosis of a disease. So it is based on that. So further going on these types of clinical research, I'll just tell you about the names, because this is not very important. We'll just skip through these. Epidemiology is more related to finding out the numbers, like cardiovascular disease is causing millions of deaths per year. So that is epidemiology. What is the overall effect of a disease in the population? If you can, like surveys, those are mostly the ones in which epidemiology is concerned with. And then comes the behavioral research. So yoga is a behavioral research, psychology is a behavioral research, where we don't talk about a drug, but we talk about different kinds of therapies which are usually given to the patients. Okay. Then comes the health service research, or this is mostly done by the companies to get their instruments or drugs approved. Okay. Okay. Is this scribbling from my side?
Because of someone is unmuting themselves, so they should keep their mic mute.
Okay. And are you also able to see some scribblings on the screen? Like I
Yeah,
may.
yeah. Just now it happened, not before. Yeah.
Okay.
So I
Was it
request
from my end?
everyone to follow the small discipline on this workshop session.
Okay. So is this disturbing, or should we do something about it?
Now it will not repeat. I think so. We informed everyone. So
Okay, great. Fine. So I'll go ahead with the other parts. Like, so we'll talk about the research cycle. As you know, research is a very what I feel is during my bachelor's, whenever we spoke about research, there was a huge fear that it's a very complicated topic. We don't know what it is. A lot of there was a problem with understanding first. So this particular slide will help you to understand research, what it is. So the thing that we have to understand is the cycle, which deals with developing a research question, then designing the study, implementing the study, analyzing the results of the study, and inferring the conclusions of the study. And if you feel that after inferring the conclusion also, if your outcome is incomplete, then you again refine the research question and redevelop the research question. So that is how you will be working on research. So that's it. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are altogether 5 components, and these are the only 5 components that you need to understand the entire research process. It's nothing more than this. Okay. So as you can see, hmm, as you can see, it is as plain and as simple as this. Like now suppose if you want to understand if I want to explain this taking an example, so what I would say is, does yoga help in hypothyroidism? Now this is my question, research question. I want to understand this. Now pertaining to this question, I have to develop a study. and decide which design would be appropriate for the study. So yoga and hypothyroidism. Definitely it would be a clinical trial wherein I have to give a group of hypothyroid patients yoga and see the effect. Now it can be a different, there can be different kinds of designs. So we'll be talking about designs in the further slides. So I'll just skip that aspect. Suppose I designed a pre-post study. Okay, so pre-post study wherein what I did was I chose a population, and I decided the sample size from that population. So all the terms that I am talking right now, everything is very much scientific and research based terms. Now these are the terms that I want all of you to get acquainted to and familiar to. So if you have a pen and a pencil, and if you're not understanding any of the terms that I say, then
Maybe people should switch off your mic and do not scribble on the screen because it's disturbing the whole session. Sorry.
shall I go on? Okay, shall I continue the presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sorry for that.
No problem. So, okay, so I was talking about a research question. So I developed the research question. The research question was, does yoga help the patients with hypothyroidism? Okay. Now what I have to do is I have to decide which design will be the most appropriate design for this question. So there are a lot of designs. We'll talk about it in the next slide. Right now, I'll just tell you that I choose a study which is a pre-post uh, design. Okay, so in this pre-post design, what will happen is I will choose a population. So the population is hypothyroid patients. Okay, now from these population of hypothyroid patients, I choose to derive a sample. Sample will be definitely from statistical methods. So yeah, so we'll calculate a sample size based on the statistical methods. And then once we have the sample size, what we will do is, okay, so sample size, suppose it is 100. So now I know that I have to give yoga to 100 patients to understand the effect of this intervention. Okay, so I will implement this study now. Once I implement the study, I will make these 100 people or patients to do yoga, and then I will record the outcomes. So outcome should be very much sensitive to your research question. So now my research question is to understand the effect of yoga in hypothyroid patients. So definitely my outcomes should be very much relevant to hypothyroidism, something that can measure the extent of hypothyroidism, right? So the easiest tool is finding out their thyroid levels, right? T3, T4, and TSH. So basically, I'll just get a thyroid function test done before and after to understand the effect. So this is just implementing the study. Now these 100 patients performed yoga. Before doing yoga, their thyroid function test was measured. Then they performed yoga for, suppose I have to decide the study duration. So probably for 3 months. And then after 3 months, again, I will do the same test, thyroid function test to, again, I'll do it because after the study duration is over, we need to record the data again. Okay, so now what do I have? The pre data and the post data. So this pre and post data, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare which one was higher, whether before doing yoga their thyroid levels were higher, thyroid hormone levels were higher, or after doing yoga their thyroid hormones were higher. So based on this, I'll compare whether yoga helps to reduce the levels of T3, T4 or increase the levels of T3, T4. Basically, whatever the result would be, based on that, I'll conclude. And that conclusion will be obtained from the analysis of the results. Okay, so this analysis of the result is very much dealing with what outcome will I get. Suppose now after yoga, the T3 and T4 levels were increased, which is the expected outcome. So my conclusion is that yoga helps to stimulate the thyroid functions, hence increasing the secretion of thyroid hormones. Okay, so this is the entire cycle of developing a research project. That's it you have to do. Now, okay, this is one slide that we'll be discussing at the end of this presentation also, which is how to design your own research protocol. This is very much relevant to the final year students. We'll discuss about it at the end. Okay, and so now this slide is very much important for all of you. Understanding the study design. Understanding the study design is very much important because you'll get a lot of different kinds of study designs later, and the sample size calculation completely depends on what kind of study it is. So that is why you have to understand what kind of study you are going to do, then calculate the sample size, and even analysis later, whatever types of test you are going to use, statistical test, everything depends on the design. So yes, the first thing that we would use to categorize the study design is presence or absence of a intervention. Okay, so as you can see, the first classification is experimental study or observational study. That means presence of a intervention. So what is an intervention? I'll just tell you. Any situation or any tool that can be manipulated by the researcher is basically the intervention. So I am going to administer some tool on you and see its effectiveness. So that is an intervention. For us, if we are doing something related to yoga research, yoga is an intervention. Okay. So now, if there is an intervention or a tool which will be implemented, then it is a experimental design. If there isn't a intervention, then it is an observational study. So as the terms indicate by themselves, here in experimental study, we are going to conduct a experiment where you will have a population, you will give them something and see the effect of whatever you have given. How does it work? And then the second aspect is observational study. So in this observational study, you will simply observe. So that is the only literal meaning of it. Now let us go to the experimental study. Now based on so there is a term called randomization. I hope all of you might have come across it once or twice whenever you are reading a research paper. So the randomization is a process in which the subjects are randomly allocated into different groups where each subject has equal chance of being in any of the group. Okay, so that is how random allocation works. And this is a very important method in research because this tells us that there was no manipulation done during the research. The researcher was not aware whether person A will fall into yoga group or person B will fall into yoga group. So there was no chance that I will decide it by myself if it is a randomized controlled trial. Okay, so that is why randomized control trial is a very superior form of evidence that I'll show you in my last slide. So I hope everybody is clear with the process of randomization. Okay. So if you are not very clear, because I have not said a lot of things about it, you can just note it down in your question if something specific you want to ask for our question and answer section. So meanwhile, I'll explain. So if the subjects are randomly chosen, whether they will fall into yoga group or they will fall into non-yoga group, that means it is a randomized control trial, as you can see, also called as RCT. And if there is no randomization done, then it is a non-randomized control trial. Okay, so this is end of experimental study. Now let me show you the observational study. Most of the people get confused over here, and this remains a question for lifetime. What is case control study? What is a cohort study? It remains a very big confusion. So the first thing about observational study you have to understand is that there is going to be no intervention at all. Okay, so in this case there can be a comparative group. You can observe the simple phenomenons between two groups, or you can observe it in a single group itself. So if there is a comparison group, then it is an analytical study. If there is no comparison group, then it is a descriptive study. Okay, so first we'll finish descriptive study. So the easiest example of a descriptive study is population census. So just taking the a survey of how many people live in a community. We go door to door, we count the number, and we report that in suppose for example in Delhi, in the area called Ansari Nagar, some 2,000 people live under 500 houses. So this population census, when reported, is a descriptive study. Okay, simple plain numbers, nothing else. You just simply count and you report. Now, the second one is analytical study. So when it comes to analytical study, what you have to understand is exposure and the disease. Okay. So if you understand these two things, you will understand all these cohort, case control, and cross section. Okay. So here, what you have to do is, suppose, I'll give you the easiest example. The example is breast cancer and smoking. Okay, remember these two things. Now, it can be two ways. People who are smoking over a period of years, if they keep smoking, they can develop breast cancer, right? So in this case, what you have to understand is we will take people who are smoking for a long time, okay? And then we will follow these smoking individuals over a period of years, suppose 5 years. Now for 5 years, I'm going to be with these 50, suppose there were 50 people who were smoking. So I'll be with these 50 people. I will observe every single detail which is relevant to my study, and I will keep following them up for 5 years. So this thing is a cohort study. So why is it a cohort study? I'll tell you. So here the exposure is smoking, the disease is breast cancer. So if the direction is from exposure to disease, then it is a cohort study. Okay, like smoking to breast cancer. So first there was smoking, then over a period of time there was breast cancer in those people. Now you already have a group of 50 individuals who have breast cancer. Okay, so now if you decide to do something in this population, suppose now you want to know that how many of these 50 people were actually smoking for them to develop breast cancer. See if there is any association between smoking and breast cancer or not. In that case, this is a case control study. Okay. So what happened in case control study? The disease was already present, breast cancer, and you went back in time to find out how many of them were actually smoking and how many of them were not. So smokers and non-smokers, you went back and found out how many were smokers, how many were non-smokers. So going back from disease to finding out the exposure was the only criteria for case control study. Now comes the third thing, which is cross-sectional study. So cross-sectional is simply not based on exposure and disease. It is simply based on time. Cross-sectional means single point of time. Now, in single point of time, if you decide to collect some data and report it, that is a cross-sectional study. So the simplest example is you went into a mental hospital and you decided that you want to count the number of individuals who were depressed and anxious. So you just wanted to find out how many individuals were depressed and anxious at that point of time. So you just simply went, took the registry, found out 100 people were depressed, 100 people were anxious, and you reported that today at this point of time 100 uh, patients were depressed, 100 patients were anxious at this general at this mental hospital. So this is simply cross-sectional study which reports the result of that single point of time. Okay, I hope the entire flowchart is clear to all of you. Okay. Now, if you have any question related how to decide between exposure and disease, which direction. Now you can see in the slides also that the directionality between exposure and disease decides whether it is a case control or a cohort study. You have to remember this single point very clearly, because even if you don't understand it right now, over a period of years, when you will come across cohort studies and case control studies, if this line you remember, you will understand. Okay, just so remember it and try to understand it. And yeah, so I've covered almost everything. The only thing that I feel you might get confused with is comparison group. So comparison group is basically, in cohort study also there will be like a comparison group. Suppose okay, there is one more example of a cohort study, which is Framingham study, if you have come across it. So it is one of the biggest trial for heart diseases. And so what they did was it was based on lifestyle, how lifestyle affected the reversal of heart disease. So what they did was they gave a lifestyle intervention to a particular set of people, and then they followed them for some 5 to 10 years of duration, and then saw how much of them reversed their heart diseases and what number of them were not at all affected. So see, so there were two groups, right? One uh, one who were on this lifestyle intervention, and the other who were just simply being followed. So there's always a comparative group. Okay, now so once you understand the design of the study, the next thing that I want you to understand is types of variables. Okay, so you will always come across different kinds of variables. So this is a very much exam question, may not be very useful for you later. Only people who will pursue something in statistics might come across this again. Otherwise, purely based on your exams. So types of variables, there can be two types of variables, categorical and quantitative. So categorical variables are two, again, subclassified into nominal and ordinal. So nominal, now simply I'll just give one liners for all of these. If you want more description, you can always ask me. Okay, so nominal means anything which has simple names. You can remember it as simple names. So suppose you have 10 people, and if you represent the data of these 10 people simply as their names, suppose Tina, Meena, Geeta, Sita, Rita, and nothing else. So there is no order, there is no seniority, there is no inferiority, there is nothing. There is simple names. So that is nominal data. So it can be simple gender, female, male, then treatment groups based on the cure, smoking, non-smoking, so a lot of things. So if the data is based on simple names or gender or smoking, non-smoking, or treatment groups, or something of that sort, it is called as nominal variable. Again, if it is ordinal, ordinal means anything which any data that classifies the severity, like mild, moderate, severe. Okay, good, bad, worst. So in that way, anything which will kind of grade our data. Okay, so if that kind of data you have, then it is ordinal. Then comes, so this is to do with categorical data. Now quantitative, as the word itself explains, quantitative means something which can be measured. Okay, so definitely it will have numbers inside it. So these are not numbers. Categorical data is not number. Okay, it is mostly words, names, all that kind of data. Then quantitative data can be again two types: discrete and continuous. So as you know, people who are good at maths, so discrete is like an integer number. So integer is something which cannot be divided. It has to be a whole number. So similarly, that is discrete. So total leukocyte count. It cannot be like 11,000 and point something. It has to be a definite number. And then similarly, continuous, like discrete also can be like explaining the number of people in a room. So there cannot be 5.5 people in a room. There will always be either 5 people or 6 people. So that is discrete. Then comes continuous. So continuous is again something which can be divided into finer subclass, finer numbers, like suppose into, which can be divided into points, decimal points, which can be expressed. So suppose for example, yeah, so for example, your blood pressure, your BMI, your, I mean, age, like you can be of 18 years and 6 months. Your BMI can be 22.9. Then your blood pressure also can be uh, in decimal points. So that is all to do with variables. Okay. Okay. Now what I want to explain is a research question. So this is all basics, because I'm not covering a lot of things. Basically, the whole idea was that whatever I'll be talking, it will be mostly in research terminologies, and I'll be trying to explain all these terminologies during my presentation itself. In case if I leave out any of these terminologies, kindly, yeah, kindly note it down, and then ask later. Okay. Just a second. Okay, just give me a second. Yeah. Okay, so the second part of the presentation begins here, which is formulating a research question. As I told you how important it is to understand how you can make a research question. Okay, I did not ask all of you in the beginning, are you comfortable with English? Sorry. Okay, assuming that you are comfortable. Fine. So how important it is to know how to formulate a research question, because I, being a researcher right now, I'm doing nothing but just formulating the research questions, conducting my research project, and then analyzing the data that I get, and then publishing my research work. So that is all what I'm doing right now. So imagine if I don't know how to formulate a research question. So my entire profession would be in a soup, right? So it is that important for a researcher to understand how to formulate a research question. So if you are going to make your own dissertation, or if you are going to read research papers, you need to understand how a research question is formed. And that is all. Once you know how to form a research question, you will know the other steps by yourself. You don't actually have to think a lot about it. Okay? So let's go to the next slide. Okay. So as you know, there's a lot of chocolate, and I know that half of you must be drowsy and you need carbohydrate load. So since I cannot provide you physically chocolates, I just thought of putting it into my slides. Okay. So I hope that helped. Now let us see how many of these. Now, there are different effects of chocolate on your body, definitely. Okay, so as you can see, it has effect on your blood pressure, on your digestion, on your brain, on your heart, on your appetite, and a lot of other factors. Now, my entire session for developing a research question is based on this itself. So let's move on to that. Okay. So, when we think about chocolate, what questions should come in your mind if you are a researcher? Okay, what will be the type of the chocolate? How many number of chocolates? Suppose if I'm thinking of a project, right, pertaining to understand the effect of chocolate on the human body, then I have to understand what type of chocolate I'll be using, what number of chocolate do I have to give to a person to see the effect, what time of the day, how many times of the day, how does it help in improving the cognition if I am to see the effect of chocolate on cognition. Okay, so all these things will be taken into consideration. Now, the next step would be, okay, so right now, what have I done till now? So I have broadly understood the topic that I want to research in. So the topic is understanding the effect of chocolate on human body, right? So on human body, especially on cognition. So now, as I showed you, these these things can be the questions that will come into my mind when I am developing the study. Now, the next set of questions which will come is, if I have to measure the cognition before and after the consumption of chocolate, how will I measure it? First, the second thing would be, when should I measure for the benefit? Like, do I have to measure it immediately after they eat chocolate, or do I have to measure it after a certain minutes or hours? So what should be the uh, when should I measure it? Then will it help to improve the scores, especially if I'm using some cognitive assessment tool? Will it help to improve those cognitive assessment tool scores? Will there be any other benefits in the same study? Can I measure them also? Will there be any side effects? If like, it's definitely it's the chocolate is it is an intervention, definitely, and every intervention can have a side effect. So definitely we have to think about the side effects also. Then we have to think about the toxicity also. So these will be the questions that will come into my mind. Okay, so now you basically you understood that when we are starting to formulate a study, first you have to decide the broader topic. Now, under that broader topic, you have to decide that what are you, suppose the broader topic was effect of chocolate on human body. Now, under that, I have to make it again very specific. So I can't measure everything in the human body, right? So I have to narrow it down to one system which I can measure. Suppose cognition. Okay, effect of chocolate on cognition. Now, how do I measure those cognitive functions? Definitely, there would be a cognitive assessment tool. So I decide to use that tool. So my outcome measure is the tool which is used to measure the effect that you are wanting to see. So if you want to see the effect on cognitive system, any measurement tool which will be used to measure your cognition is the outcome measure. Okay, so is the outcome measure. So you have to decide what tools you are going to use to measure cognition, and then you have to decide something related to the intervention. So what amount of chocolate are you going to give? How many times are you going to give? when are you going to measure the cognition, before or after, immediately or later of consuming the chocolate. So there are a lot of things that you will have to think once you proceed with your research project. And that understanding of what questions are to be asked, what things are to be considered, will come with experience. Okay. And will come with knowledge and experience. So you don't have to worry about these two things, because these two things you will gain automatically. Okay. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, now these are a few examples which have already been published. Studies like an observational study which an observational study which suggests health benefits of chocolate. Then again, there is another study which says, you can see how the topics are. A temptation I can resist. So it is very much dramatic. So these are letter to editors. Like letter to editors are small note of written by a researcher to the editor of the journal, saying that this is my point of view regarding that, regarding chocolate, suppose. Now, let us come to actual study. So as you can see, there are studies which have already studied the effect of cocoa on various aspects of cognition, like benefits in cognitive functions, blood pressure, and insulin. So, benefits in cognitive functions, blood pressure, and insulin resistance through cocoa flavanol consumption in elderly subjects with mild cognitive impairment. So, now if I have to, uh, focus, which is the broader topic here. So, the broader topic is cognition again, and the effect of cocoa. The tools that are used are cognitive function, blood pressure, insulin resistance. So these three things will be measured using different tools, because they haven't mentioned it in the title, definitely. And uh, and the population that they will be seeing this effect is in elderly subjects who have mild cognitive impairment. So from the title itself, you are going to get that much of idea of the research question, what they are doing inside the study. Now, as I told you, we have already discussed a randomized control trial, right? So this study is basically the population of elderly subjects was randomly allocated into one into cocoa group, one into non-cocoa group. So that is why this is a randomized control trial. Okay. So let us see how the research question is. In patients with mild cognitive, so definitely, as you can see in this question, not everything is mentioned, right? Um, and you're not able to understand the entire scenario of research. Now, in any research question or title, you need to understand certain things that we will discuss now. Hmm. So the first thing that you need to understand is the population. In what population the research is going to be conducted, or what is the researcher interested in, which population is he or she interested. Then comes the intervention, which is I. Intervention or independent variable also, it is also called as input variable or index test. I've already told you about intervention. So these are synonyms for intervention itself. Okay. Then comes the C, which is comparator. Anything which can be compared to the study group. So it can be called as comparator, it can be called as control or comparison, anything. Then comes the fourth aspect, which is outcome, health outcome, patient oriented outcome. So everything means the outcome measure. I've already explained you about the outcome measure. So while formulating your research question, you need to be very clear with P, which is population, I, which is intervention, C, which is comparator, and O, which is outcome. So PICO. So you remember it as PICO, okay? So every research question has to have these 4 components. Only then it is a very good research question, and only then every reader who sees your question understands what you're doing just by the title. Okay, so let us go back to our research question. So see, if I want you to identify the P over here, which is the population, definitely elderly. Which is the intervention, definitely cocoa. Which is the comparator over here, they have not mentioned. Okay, there's no comparator group. Then again, which is the outcome measure, they have mentioned it, and that is cognitive function, blood pressure, and insulin resistance. Though they have not been very specific how will these things be measured, but still an idea has been given. Now definitely this question can be refined further. Okay, so let's see how it can be made better. Now, in patients with mild cognitive impairment, consumption of dairy-based cocoa drink containing cocoa flavonols, either at high, intermediate, or low level. So level also they have measured for 8 weeks will improve the cognition. So this is our research question. Now this talks about every aspect of our PICO. The first aspect being the population. Population is patients with mild cognitive impairment. Then the intervention being dairy-based cocoa. Then the comparator. Since this is a non-comparative study and there's only one single group, need not be, this is not a RCT it's either, so there is no comparison group. Okay, we are studying by giving it to one single group, so that is why there is no C. Now let's talk about the O. So what would be the O? Talking about the outcome, they're only mentioning about cognition. So cognition is the outcome. Okay, so all these three, out of 4, all these 3 things are already mentioned in the research question. And the third thing, which is comparator, is not applicable at all because the research design doesn't allow a comparator in the study. So that is why this is a good research question. Okay. Okay. Now, when we are talking about formulating a research question, you always have to think about few things before you think of a topic. Now, suppose, as we spoke about yoga and hypothyroidism, okay? So before you are thinking about that topic, you have to contemplate on these questions. So the questions are, why do you need this study? Like, do we actually need to conduct studies on yoga and hypothyroidism? Okay, so to answer that question, yes, we need to conduct because there are no sufficient studies which have been conducted in this field, and patients who suffer from hypothyroidism, they have not I mean, there are no treatment method which can completely treat their disease. Till now, whatever treatment modality has been has been developed can only deal with the symptoms of the disease, but not cure the disease. So definitely we should try to find out treatment modalities which will be focused towards the cure and not just towards the management of symptoms. Then comes the second one, who needs it? Like, I want to do a study on yoga and hypothyroidism. Is it needed? Definitely, it is needed for the patients suffering from hypothyroidism. Then, how will it help? It will definitely help in curing the disease or to some extent reversing hypothyroidism. Okay, so what do you expect? We expect betterment in the symptoms and the disease prognosis when yoga is given to these patients. Now, is your expectation right? And if it is right, so what? suppose now if my topic wasn't yoga and hypothyroidism, and my topic was, let me think of a topic. Yeah, so let me think of a topic whether is okay. Let me think of a very silly topic. So my topic is mango yellow? That is also a research question for me. Like, I have not seen enough mangoes in the world, and I don't know what is the actual color of mango. So I just want to find out what is the actual color of mango. That is also a research question. Now, do we need this study? If I have to repeat all these questions, do we need the study? Maybe we need the study because I personally don't know the color of the mango, so I want to conduct the study. Maybe it is needed. Not very clear answer to this. Now, who needs it? I need it. Definitely, it's not needed by any other person because everybody knows the color of mango. Just I don't know the color of a mango. So definitely, it's not needed to a larger population. Then how will it help? It will help me to understand that the color of yellow, the mango is yellow, but it will not help anybody else to understand anything greater and anything novel, right? So what do you expect? uh, so I expect different set of colors, any one of them to be the color of a mango, right? So that is the research expectation. If my expectation is right, so what? Okay, fine, I found out that the color of mango was yellow. So what? How is it going to help to people? There is no application of this research project that I'll be conducting. So that is why this what is very important. That whatever you are doing, research is a very tedious process. It requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of resources. So if there is no place where your research outcome or the result of your research is applicable, then that research should not be conducted. Okay. So research question, you have to be very clear that the study that you are trying to do is needed by a bigger group of people. It has a place in the society where it can be applied. Okay. And it should be helpful, it should be useful, and it should be something which is not done previously. So these are the basic characteristics of research that you need to understand. Now I have already done the research cycle. I hope you understand, you have understood it. And we've already discussed the characteristics that the research question should have. Now let's just revise our PICO. For example, in a population of injection drug users with HIV infection, is heart use associated with fewer opportunistic infections? So heart is a therapy intervention used for people who are affected with HIV. And so we want to find out whether in the population of injection drug users who inject the medication with HIV infection, is heart use associated with fewer opportunistic infections? So let's find out what is PICO over here. So the population is injection drug users. Okay, so the population is injection drug users with HIV infection. That is our P. Intervention is heart. Then, okay, sorry. Then the comparator is not there because we are only studying a single group. And the outcome is, again, the incidence of opportunistic infection. Okay, so that is the first example. Now the second example, again we'll have to find out PICO. So in a population of pregnant females with epilepsy, the population is pregnant female with epilepsy. The intervention is treatment with sodium valproate associated with higher risk of neural tube defects. So this is the outcome. So we want to study in a population of pregnant females with epilepsy, is treatment with sodium valproate associated with higher risk of neural tube defects. So neural tube defect is like spina bifida and anything to do with any congenital abnormality at the level of nervous system. Okay. And Yeah. So here the population is again the pregnant females. The intervention is the medicine, sodium valproate. And what are we measuring? The risk of neural tube defect. Okay, so this is our research question. Okay, now I'm towards the end of my presentation. So before I end the presentation, I would like all of you to, oh, sorry. Okay, so this was meant to be the level of evidence. I'm very sorry. Uh, let me go to the, just a second. Okay, so I want to show you that there is a hierarchy in research of all the studies. Okay, so I'll simply take you to Google. Just give me. Okay. Level of evidence in research. We'll end with, this is the second last thing that I want to show. After that, we'll do an activity. Let's go for the simplest image. This should be fine. Okay, so yeah, I hope you're able to see the image. Okay, so I'm assuming that you're able to see the screen. And okay, so the lowest level of evidence is any idea, opinion, editorial, or anecdotal. So these are
We are unable to see, ma'am.
okay. You're unable to see. Okay, um,
Yes, ma'am.
1 second.
You have to change the sharing option, like it's in
Yeah.
PPT. So
Now can you see?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. So right now you are seeing a pyramid which denotes the level of evidence in research. Okay. So why I want you to understand this is because if you are deciding to make a project for your dissertation or for any, it's not necessary that you have to decide for a research question only for your, just a second, only for your dissertation. You can decide to pursue a project right now, irrespective of which year you are in, irrespective of what you are studying right now. You can always do a project. So if you are doing a project, you have to understand which research design falls under which level of evidence, so that you can choose a better design, because you are going to work hard for it. So why not work hard for the best? Okay. So the lowest level is ideas, opinions, editorials, anecdotals, something which has not been experimented upon, which are just raw ideas. Okay. Then comes case series or case reports. Case series or case reports are usually done for rare diseases. Suppose when diabetes was a rare disease, people who first discovered diabetes. So when they saw diabetes in a patient, they simply noted it down. What was the symptom, what they saw, and what therapy was given to them, and what was the effect of that therapy. So that aspect is also optional. Therapy option is optional. Usually they just describe the patient in total. And if it's a single patient, it's a case report. If it's a series of case reports, multiple number of patients are there, then you call it a case series. Okay. Now, after the case report, the cross sectional studies. Cross sectional studies we already discussed. The ones where you are reporting any research, anything which is related to your research in a single point of time. Suppose if I am reporting that patients with coronary artery disease, okay, patients with coronary artery disease are more prone to depression before before the surgery, bypass surgery. Okay, so this is like, if it is a cross sectional study, then I will just measure the depression in these coronary artery disease patients at a single time point. I will not repeat the measurement at all. I'll just simply go find out patients with coronary artery disease ask them to fill the questionnaire of depression, and then based on the score, I will decide that if out of 10 coronary artery patients, if 6 patients were depressed, I will say that I measured depression for 10 patients, and out of 10, 6 were having depression. So that means majority of coronary artery disease patients have depression. So that is a cross-sectional study, just single point of time. I just measured and I reported. Okay, so that doesn't have a lot of reliability, because it just says right now. That right now can be because of a lot of things. Maybe that patient was depressed because of something else, not because of coronary artery disease. Maybe that patient was depressed because he had a bad day. So you cannot judge whether it was because of coronary artery disease or whether it was because he was having a bad day or he just quarreled with his wife. So anything can be the reason, right? So that is why cross-sectional studies are not so reliable. Now the next study is case control study. So we have already discussed the case control study, going back in time or going from one point of like from, suppose the easiest example was breast cancer, taking patients with breast cancer and seeing what was the cause of the breast cancer, whether it was because of smoking, whether it was because of lifestyle, whether it was um, because of stress, tension, however, whatever is factors, studying the risk factors. Okay, so that is case control study. Then comes cohort study. Cohort study is definitely better than case control studies, because what happens is in this cohort study you are following the natural flow of events. So there is a group of patients, and you are following that group of patients over a period of time and seeing what effects they are having. Suppose breast cancer patients. So now you want to see that out of some 10 breast cancer patients, how many can recover with chemotherapy and how many are not recovering with chemotherapy. Okay, so you are going to follow these 10 patients for next 5 years, and whatever cycle of chemotherapy they are going through, and at the end of their cycle you are going to assess these patients whether they recovered completely or partially, or they didn't recover at all. So this was following the natural flow. That is why this is cohort, and it's a better study because there is a lesser chance of manipulation over here. Okay. And then RCT, randomized control trial, the least chance of manipulation is there in RCT, because there are a lot of rules, and even the researcher is not aware that if he is recruiting, suppose, so I'll give you an example of RCT. Okay. So suppose I'm conducting a study on yoga and depression. Okay, so I want to compare the effect of uh, yoga on patients with depression. So this is a randomized control trial. I have a group who will be performing yoga, and I have a group who will be doing nothing at all. So there are two groups, because a randomized control trial, usually there should be a control. Control is a comparative group who is usually doing something which is similar to the intervention sometimes, and sometimes they're not doing anything just to nullify, uh, or what do we say, just to okay, I have to explain you in more simpler way. Mm, okay, so suppose one group. Okay, so yeah, so you have to find out the effect of uh, physical activity. Okay, so there are 10 children. You have to find out the effect of physical activity on mood. So what you're going to do is you're going to divide that 10 children into two groups, and 5 in one group, 5 in another group. So the first group, you are going to give physical activity. Okay, and you are going to see what is the effect of that physical activity on their mood. How you can measure it in questionnaires, or you can measure it at a scale of 1 to 10, however you want. Okay, So you ask those five children before performing the physical activity that how was their mood. Some average of out of 10, 5 was the average of their mood. Then again you gave them a physical activity, and then again you measured after the physical activity the mood elevated and it went to an average of 7. Okay, so this was one group. Now similarly, what you're going to do is you have already divided the another group, right? In that another group, you are going to give nothing. You are going to measure their mood before and after, and you are going to show that when you give nothing, there is no change. So if you say that when you gave nothing, there was no change, that means in the other group, in the first group, the intervention was solely responsible for the improvement and nothing else was responsible. Because sometimes what happens is these children may have other activities like music class or dance class or something else in their daily routine which might elevate their mood. So if that was the case, then the mood elevation should have been in both the groups, right? Why did it only happen in physical activity group? That means solely physical activity was responsible for elevating the mood. So that is the significance of having a control group. So when you have a control group, you can say whatever effect you have gotten from the experiment is solely from your intervention and nothing else. There is no confounding variable. The confounding variable is something, a variable can affect affect the outcome measured equally like the intervention. So it is suppose you want to study the effect of yoga on these children, but they're already doing music class, dance class, they're already doing karate. So how do you know that whatever effect you are seeing is not because of music, dance and karate class, and but it is because of yoga, right? So that is why. So this music class, karate class, and this what was it, music, dance and karate class can be a confounding variable to your yoga. So that is why if you take two groups who are doing these three things, but only one group is doing one extra thing, that is physical activity, and only in that physical activity group you are seeing some positive changes in mood, that means the physical activity solely is responsible for the change and nothing else. So that is why RCT is the highest level of evidence, because this comparison between the group between the study group and the control group is not present in any other design, and it tells you how effective is your intervention. Okay, now in just to explain that randomization process. Now when you are dividing those 10 children who are doing physical activity and not and who will not be doing physical activity, so during that decision, the person, suppose if I am deciding who will fall under this group and who will fall under that group, if I am if suppose yeah, so I'm going to what I'm going to do is going to physically go hold them individually and segregate them into two groups. So at that time, if I know their names and if I know how capable they are, then what I'll do, I'll take all the good ones and put it in my physical activity group, because I think that I should get a better result. So that means I'm manipulating. So if there is randomization, then I will not be able to manipulate. I will not be knowing their names at all. I will not be knowing whom am I holding, because suppose, for example, I'll be blindfolded. So if I'm blindfolded and I'm asked to go and segregate these 10 children into two groups, I won't be knowing whom I'm putting in which group. So that is actually randomization process, wherein the researcher is is unaware of which group will the subject be falling into. There are different types of randomization. The easiest example is flipping a coin. So if you flip a coin, you don't know you're going to get heads or tails. So if you get heads, the person in front of you will go for a yoga group. If you get tails, he will go for a control group. So this can be the easiest way of randomization. Okay. Now the last level of evidence is systematic review. Okay. Is it okay to continue for 5-10 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So the last level of evidence is systematic review and meta-analysis. So this is a very complex design of study that you can develop. So what is systematic review? Is suppose for yoga and depression, there has been 10 studies till now. Okay, 10 different studies. Now, how do I believe which study is a better study? Right? Very much of a dilemma this is for people who want to go some because one study will say that yoga is effective, the other study will say that it is not effective. So I don't know what should I do. In that case, systematic review and meta-analysis is helpful. First, in systematic review, what will happen is, so the researcher is going to find out all these 10 studies, compile these 10 studies in a single research article. Okay, and they are going to find out the level of each study, whether it was conducted better or not. So this process is called as assessment of bias. How much of a bias is bias is suppose bias is like a compromise. So whether the study was done in a very good quality, or whether there were some compromises that was made during the study in the method aspect. Okay, so that is called bias in the most simplest language. So we'll assess bias of each of these 10 studies and tell which level of evidence was each study, how well was it conducted. So if that is done, then everybody knows which study to refer. Now this is systematic review. Systematic review wherein you compiled these 10 studies, compared them with each other, and then you also said that which one was a better study among all of these. Okay. Now, meta-analysis. So in this meta-analysis, what happens is you are going to give a pooled effect. Suppose in these 10 studies, the depression score was calculated. Now, suppose if it was calculated in out of 10, one study calculated that out of 10, the score of depression was reduced from 10 to 5. So there was a change in 5 units. The other study found out that there was a change in 2 units. And then the third study found out that there was a change in 3 units. So how do you believe that which was the actual change? How much do you say that how much yoga can affect depression? So you have to quantify one measure, right? So in that case, meta-analysis, what you do is you add the effect of all these three things, three studies. Like there was a 5 unit change in the first study, 5, plus 2 unit change in the second study, 2, plus 3 unit change in the third study, 3. So it becomes 10, 10 divided by 3. So somewhere around 3 point something, right? So the average change in the depression score was 3 point something. So this is what meta-analysis does. It gives you an average of effect of yoga on depression patients. Okay, so that is meta-analysis. As you go on reading all these things, you will have a better understanding, definitely. Let's go back to the slides. Okay. So okay, so I wanted to do this activity. I hope if I can do it. Okay, so what I want to do is, as I told you, I want all of you to find out one research topic for yourself. Anything. Okay, so at least if five of you can also share your research topic, it would be more than enough. We'll discuss the PICO characteristic in those research question, and I'll tell you that if whatever research question you have formulated is good enough or not, like if you have to refine that question. Okay, so think of it as an opportunity. If any of you are a final year student, if you have already thought of your research project, maybe we can discuss it right now. I just need the titles. Okay, so one of you, I think Bhavit is conducting the session. You can unmute one by one, or you can unmute yourself whoever is interested in
They
participating.
can unmute and they can ask to how are they?
So I'm ready to take one by one research questions. Okay, shall we start?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, like effect of sleep pattern on cytokines and circadian rhythm.
Okay, repeat of sleep patterns
On circadian rhythm and the
on
like related with the cytokine, the levels of cytokines in the body. Hello.
cytokines. Yeah, 1 second.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So who is this? May I know name?
Ma'am, I'm Sridharan from SDM final year.
So Sridharan wants to study the effect of sleep patterns on circadian rhythm and levels of cytokines. So there is a little problem with the question. So you have to decide a okay. Huh.
Even just wait. I think maybe because of network she disconnected. Yeah, ma'am is there.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am, it's clear.
Okay. So, Sridharan, we can have a discussion on your topic first. So, you to understand the effect of different sleep patterns on the circadian rhythm and levels of cytokine in the body. So, when you refer to sleep patterns, what do you mean by that?
Like whether the person is sleeping within the range of time, whether he's sleeping by 10 or 11 or 12, and how much time he is sleeping, then when he is getting up, the amount of sleep quality, everything.
Okay, so we'll make it little simple. Okay, so the effect of sleep pattern, instead of that, what you can do is the number of sleeping hours, maybe. Okay, so somebody might be sleeping for 2 hours, somebody might be sleeping for 4 hours, so somebody might be sleeping for 16 hours, right? So because when you talk about sleep pattern and how you explained it, there are a lot of, again, there is a lot, it's a very huge thing, and you'll have to be very specific when you are deciding for a research question. So being specific, what I'll do is I'll simply change the sleep pattern into number of sleep hours. Okay, so now your question has become effect of number of sleep hours on circadian rhythm and levels of cytokines in the body. So which is somewhat good, better, specific enough. Okay, now you tell me
But
on which we are going to find out 4 things out of this question. P, I, C, O. Tell me what is the population in the research question. On whom do you want to see this?
on students, ma'am, students.
Okay, students. So, which do you want to specify more? Like
Students of
graduate, postgraduate, or school students?
school students, yeah, school students, yeah, from standard 9 to 12 or anything like that.
Okay, so
But one thing I thought, like I proposed the question in a way that if they are sleeping at night or if they are sleeping in the morning, what is the difference between those two things? I meant to ask that. Yeah.
okay, so you want to know that if somebody is sleeping in the night or somebody is sleeping in the morning, what is the difference?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
so if we have to put it that way, Then it will be effect of so we'll keep it as effect of sleep onset time. Effect of time of sleep. Okay.
Yes,
Onset,
ma'am.
you can always refine your title gradually. Like initially, you should just focus that your title should give the general idea. It is communicating general idea of what you want to find out. You can always put better terminologies later. So I'm just putting it for the sake of moving forward. Okay. So effect of time of sleep onset on circadian rhythm and levels of cytokines. So the population is school going. Intervention, there is no intervention over here, right? We are
No
simply
intervention.
observing. We're simply observing that if somebody sleeps in the morning, if somebody sleeps in the night, what is the difference between these two groups? So basically, there is no intervention.
Yes,
So there is a comparator group, people who sleep in morning and people who sleep at night,
yes, ma'am.
or daytime sleeping and nighttime sleeping, better terms.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Then the outcome. Now you tell me, you want to measure two things: the effect on circadian rhythm and the effect on levels of cytokines. Have you thought about it? Like, how do you, which outcome measures do you want to use? So
Ma'am, didn't
because
get your question exactly.
so the fourth thing that you have to decide is the outcome measure. Do you know what is outcome measure?
We have not found it right, ma'am. Like we are just conducting it. Like we don't know. You are asking what's our perception related to it, or something like that.
Okay. So outcome measure is the tool that you are going to use. The tool with which you are going to measure the level of cytokine, the tool with which you are going to measure the effect on the circadian rhythm. So if I have to give you, for example, circadian rhythm can be measured by polysomnography. Okay. So
Okay,
you
ma'am.
have to, so polysomnography is sleep study. Okay, so sleep study can be done, and level of cytokines again can be measured with. It's a biochemical test. So you have to decide which cytokines you want to measure, and you can measure that. Okay, so in
Yes.
outcome, again, being a graduate student, like undergraduate student, what you have to decide is the outcome measure should be very simple and something available. Now, do
Yes.
you have polysomnography is a test which is quite extensive, and it requires a lot of electrodes and a lot of heavy machinery.
Inflammatory markers we can check, right, ma'am?
Yes, it's a biochemical test, so you can always send the sample outside. So you can definitely measure some cytokines and inflammatory markers. So that can actually be a better study. So if I have to summarize your topic, we can make it like effect of daytime sleeping and nighttime sleeping on circadian rhythm. On inflammation in school going students. Okay, so
Yes, ma'am.
here you are already talking about what you want to see. You want to see daytime sleeping and nighttime sleeping on inflammation, and you want to see it in the population of school going students. So this is a good study. You can go ahead with that.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
anyone else?
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, myself Shruti from JSS first year.
Okay.
Effect of emulsifiers on our health is the research question I want to put on.
Okay. So when you are talking about emulsifier, Shruti, I want you to explain it to everybody else so that we understand what is emulsifier from your perspective.
So from my perspective, emulsifiers are those molecules that bind both in water soluble and non-polar substances together. To bind polar and non-polar substances together, emulsifiers are used in many products in our food items like processed meat, ice creams, chocolates, and baked products. I want to study on what are the side effects that they cause in our health while we take them in our uh,
Okay. So it's basically a chemical compound, right? That is used in, I mean, all these preserved food and everything, I guess.
yes, ma'am, chocolates and all these baked products.
Okay. So your question is effect of emulsifier on health.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you have, as we discussed, we have to always define the research question in terms of population, intervention, comparator, and outcome. Okay. So you have to define. So you have to define which is the population where you want to find out the effect of emulsifiers. Okay. Then you have to decide what is the intervention. So special right now, definitely we can decide for food products, or depends if you want to, the design of the study has to be decided whether you want to do a survey based on who are already consuming these things. You go to them and you just measure repetitive data, suppose like a cohort study. So what you have to do is identify a pool of people who are already having these things. Okay. And then take the baseline data and follow them up for some 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, how much ever months you think that emulsifiers can have effect on health. So after that duration, again take the data one more time and you can tell, compare. So that can be one of the studies. Or what you can do is you can find a population that you're interested in. Suppose you want to see the effect of emulsifiers in adolescents, because they are the ones who are consuming it a lot. So you find a population of adolescents, then you give them all these emulsifiers and you study the effect over a period of time. Okay. So you have to decide the design of the study. Based on that, the intervention will be decided. Then the third thing is comparator. Will there be a comparator group or not? So what you can do is you can compare between us group who are having that kind of preserved food and a group who are not at all having that kind of preserved food. When these two groups will be compared with each other, then your study findings will be better approved. And then fourth one is outcome. In what ways? Like you said, you want to see the effect on health. So how do you measure health? What outcomes can you take? So there can be a general health based questionnaire like a WHO questionnaire, SF36 questionnaire. So there are a lot of questionnaires which will measure general health. Or there can be biological parameters, like if you want to measure it in terms of digestive health, then maybe what you can do is you can go for some biochemical test which will measure the level of different digestive enzymes, or something related to your research question itself. What do you think emulsifier will affect on? Okay. So as I can see that this question is a very broad question. So if you want to narrow it down, maybe you can unmute your mic and then tell me about which population and which intervention, comparator, and outcome, or else we can discuss something else.
Ma'am, maybe in the adolescence, I want to test on the effect on brain neurons.
Okay. So in adolescence, you want to check, and maybe you want to check on neurological hormone, like neuro.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So,
And probabilities of them getting exposed to cancers.
so risk of cancer also you want to measure. So in this case, what you have to do is you have to be very specific. Why do you want to measure the, neurotransmitters? Tell me.
Not in particular as neurotransmitters. What are the chemical changes that happen in the neurons? Like I have studied few articles where it says your mind capability of absorbing, grasping power comes down in you taking emulsifiers. So I thought I could make a study on it.
Okay. So when you say grasping capacity, it is definitely talking about the cognitive function. Okay. So that doesn't have, you don't need to measure it. Like, see, when you are in an undergraduate project, okay, so you have to understand the limitations. So measuring a neurotransmitter is going to be very costly. And maybe you will not be able to access all those things also. So you have to develop study. So you have to develop study based on like outcomes which are easily available, which you can actually find. So a questionnaire based study would be a very good study for you because you can easily find the questionnaires. But if you have a research setup in your college, then it is very good. You can always utilize the measurement tools there. So when you are talking about the grasping capacity, it is cognitive ability that you want to see actually. Okay. So you can measure probably what you can measure with emulsifiers is, yeah, maybe you can measure working memory, maybe you can measure attention, maybe you can measure what else can you do it? Yeah, a little bit of literature review is also required. So whenever you are deciding to do a project, simply what you have to do is go for a literature review. So suppose she wants to do something on effect of emulsifiers on health. So if I go on Google and type this, so I will find a lot of studies which has already been on this. So now I'm interested in something to do with nervous system. So based on everything that I find on Google Scholar and PubMed, I will basically read in detail into the effects that it has on nervous system. So from there, I can understand that what has already been done. Okay, and suppose if I understand that in emulsifiers have an effect on long-term memory, like people, it has a role in dementia, like it makes people forgetful. So then I can definitely measure memory. Okay. And then again, she said that if she wants to see the carcinogenic effect of emulsifier. So in that case, you have to again do a proper literature review and see in terms of oncology, like what kind of cancers does it cause. So emulsifiers, for example, causes colon cancer, for example. Okay, so if it causes colon cancer, that means the outcome measures have to be something to do with your intestine. So at that time, you don't measure any other system. You directly go for the measurements of your intestinal homeostasis. Okay, just to check properly, you can measure the um, visual parameters will also be there. Probably the size of, if there is a mass, then the size of the mass would also be one of the effects. Or a lot of, you will get ideas once you go for a literature review. So for Shruti, I think you should go for a proper literature review. Definitely, it's a good title, but a little bit of refining, and always think of PICO that I have taught when you are designing your project. Okay, population, intervention, comparator, and outcome. Your research question should be based on these four things. It should have these components. And when
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
okay, chalo, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so do you want me to continue with few more questions, or is it
I mean, no
too
issues
many?
if people are ready to like interested in this because already they are reduced to 20 from 70. So
Okay, so if anybody is interested, I'll take one more question.
we can. have cleared their doubts.
So I think then should we wind up the session?
Thank you so much to come on this small platform and covering the small basics things, like from the first year who is asking question till the final. So it is covering from both the aspects. So thank you so much, ma'am, on this platform. And thank you everyone who are listening for 1.5 hour more than 1 hour. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, one more thing. What you can do is, if since we have not answered any questions related to the presentation, if anybody has any specific question, you can hand it over to Bhavit and I'll answer it for you. So
For sure, it will be.
must be helpful. Okay,
Thank you so much.
welcome.
So we'll end this meeting. Thank you everyone.